everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy Thursday.
Yes.
This is Dr. Kim Scheuer and Dr. Keary O'Connor, and Keary has a phenomenal talk on triglycerides. But before she gets into it, let's find out where everybody's coming in from. So happy that everybody's joining. Feel free to put comments in the comment section, and we will try and answer as many questions as possible throughout. And so we look forward to talking from everybody. Dr. O'Connor, Keary, where are you coming in from?
Ohio.
And I'm coming in from Colorado. So ready whenever you are.
All right. So I'm going to share some slides here. And hey, Christy from Ohio.
Hey, from Ohio. Hey, Bob from Idaho. Excellent.
All right. I'm going to share my screen here, and hopefully this works. And I can, sometimes on a little tech challenge. There we go. We should see my little, we're going to talk about triglycerides today. So when we get our cholesterol panel, everyone's focused on their LDL, but triglycerides are equally important. And Dr. Scheuer is going to chime in here as well. So triglycerides, we're going to talk a little bit about what they are, sources of elevation, the numbers, problems, and what to do and steps you can take now. And Dr. Scheuer, you can see the slides okay, correct?
Absolutely. And I hope everybody can. I think so.
All right. So what are triglycerides? It's the most common type of fat or lipid in the body. It's our body's storage form of fat. We store fat as triglycerides, and we can store it in the liver. It's released to the body from the liver when we need to create heat, energy, fuels movement, and dietary sources, of course, in red, excess caloric intake, fatty foods, oils, butters, alcohol, free and added sugars, and I make that distinction versus natural sugars. We'll talk about that in a moment, and refined carbohydrates. The intrahepatic or your liver triglycerides are a marker of fatty liver disease. And when a study was done looking at the development of fatty liver disease, they looked at triglycerides, blood glucose, and A1C, and triglycerides were the ones that were most strongly associated with fatty liver disease, which, by the way, used to be called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and is now called metabolic associated steatotic liver disease. So you may have been diagnosed with hypertriglyceridemia. It means your levels are elevated. 1 in 5 adults in the US has elevated levels. And according to data and research by the Cleveland Clinic Foundation, about 42% of adults over age 60. There's typically no symptoms. Very severe elevation, you can have xanthomas, which are little lipid deposits under the skin. Again, elevated triglycerides are associated with fatty liver disease. We're going to talk specifically about fatty liver disease in this talk today. And also triglycerides, they damage the heart and our arteries. So it can lead to coronary artery disease, myocardial infarction, which is a heart attack, peripheral arterial disease, and stroke. Also contributes to diabetes, obesity, hypertension. There are non-dietary causes as well to be aware of: chronic kidney disease, other liver diseases. If you're overweight, which is a BMI greater than 25, or in the obese categories, which is a BMI greater than 30, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, hypothyroid disease, smoking, alcohol is a big one, lack of physical activity, and medications. We do have a slide on medications that can lead to elevated triglycerides. Also family history, South Asian ancestry, and there's a few other medical conditions like pregnancy, menopause, HIV status, things of that nature. So here are some things that contribute to a lipid profile, not just elevated triglycerides: poor diet, poor glucose control, not enough exercise, belly fat, and genetics. It's your family history. And speaking of food specifically, look at this: sugars, refined grains, and starchy foods, high calorie foods, saturated and trans fats, and alcohol. Now, I want to make a note here about refined grains and starchy foods. Starchy foods can be good for you, but are they highly processed, right? And refined grains, those can be problematic. So if you find your triglycerides are going up, even if you are, say, grinding your own wheat berries and making your own oat flour at home, maybe just cut back a little bit on it and use the whole intact grain instead of refining it so much.
And some of that is how fast it's absorbed, right?
Correct. Yes. Yes. Saturated fats. This is a big driver of our triglycerides. 90% of saturated fats comes from animal foods. It's found in tropical oils. Think of coconut oil, the ones that are solid at room temperature. Not only can lead to elevated LDL, but also to elevated triglyceride levels. Both can contribute to cardiovascular disease. If your triglycerides, and and we'll talk about the numbers, are over 200, you are 25% more likely to die of heart disease than somebody who has normal triglyceride numbers. So that's important to note. American Heart Association recommends not more than 5 to 6% of your total caloric intake in a day comes from saturated fat. So if we're looking at a 2,000 calorie diet, it's about 120 grams, which I kind of think is still high, but that's the current recommendation from the American Heart Association. Plants do contain saturated fats, but in very low amounts. And so anything you have that has high amounts of saturated fat, you want to move away from those and replace with mono and polyunsaturated fats. So sugar, I broke sugar down into 4 categories: natural, free added, processed, artificial, and non-nutritive. So natural sugars are the whole foods. They're the intact fruits, grains, and vegetables. They can be simple, also complex, like starch and fiber. Typically speaking, the natural whole intact sugars are not going to be problematic unless you are focused primarily on a 100% fruitarian diet. That may be too much fructose for you. It's also, you're not going to get a lot of protein, so that can be problematic. Where we start to get into trouble is free and added sugars, like eating a lot of dried fruits, blended fruits, fruit juices, syrups and honeys, processed and ultra processed foods, which are really manufactured food-like products. They're not really foods. Processed, like high fructose corn syrup. It's the conversion of glucose to fructose, typically engineered to be 42 to 55% fructose with a balance of glucose. However, studies have shown the reality it's actually closer to 60%, which is an unnatural amount of fructose for our bodies. Compare that to a whole intact orange, which is about 27%. Artificial and non-nutritive sweeteners and non-sugar sweeteners like aspartame, xylitol, stevia can be problematic. Same with saccharin and sucralose. Chemically synthesized xylitol and stevia, because it's coupled with erythritol, can increase your risk of heart attack, stroke, and death. Saccharin and sucralose, dysbiosis, and aspartame potentially an increased risk of cancer. So again, the free and added artificial and non-nutritive sweeteners, not the natural intact sugars in whole foods, can lead to cognitive impairment. Again, fatty liver, we're going to talk about that, overweight, obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancers. Sugars began to increase in the 80s when fats were associated with cardiovascular disease and refined carbohydrate consumption began to rise. More than 70% of foods in the grocery stores contain added sugars. So my challenge to everyone out there, including my patients I speak with, is stand in front of the ketchup section and the pasta section in the grocery store and see if you can find one without added sugar. It's possible, but it's a challenge. And again, the main dietary source of added, free, added, and non-natural sugars is sugar-sweetened beverages, especially for the non-nutritive sweeteners. Just a few names for sugar. There's over 60. So if no one has seen this before, it's pretty eye-opening. All right, and then also this NOVA food classification for the types of foods that we do consume was proposed in 2009 at the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil. And really where we need to focus are the processed and the ultra-processed foods that contain not only the artificial sweeteners and the free and added sugars, but also saturated fats and other chemicals that are potentially harmful to us. They're usually called GRASs, G-R-A-S. They're not tested by the FDA. They're considered generally regarded as safe. So just be aware, we need to move away from that category of food. And here's just a few of the processed foods that are out there. And you'll notice in the center, they're controlled by very few companies. So very few companies control most of what we have available to us in the marketplace. It's pretty frightening when you look at that slide. So medications, many medications are metabolized through the liver. This is just to give you an idea. But these are the medications specifically that can lead to elevated triglycerides, like antipsychotic drugs, some drugs that treat HIV, beta blockers, the ones that are non-cardio selective. There's many different categories of beta blockers, steroids, estrogens, oral estrogens, diuretics. So if you're on those, they are high alert medications for potentially raising your triglyceride levels. So speak with your physician about those. So your lab tests are back and you need to know your numbers. So what are your numbers, right? And you also need to know and understand what your risk factors are. So if you have a triglycerides 150 to 199, that's considered mild elevation. Moderate is 200 to 499, and severe is greater than 500. And remember what I said earlier, that if your triglycerides are over 200, you are 25% more likely to die of heart disease than someone who does not have elevated triglyceride levels. Should be less than 150, but less than 100 is even better. So let's talk about fatty liver disease. It is the most common cause of liver disease in the US. It is now known as metabolic associated steatotic liver disease. 30% of the population is affected. It can progress to metabolic associated steatohepatitis, which is scarring of the liver. It's the leading cause of liver transplants in women and those over age 65, and it's projected about 80,000 deaths will be due to this by 2030. There are typically no symptoms. It's often an incidental finding. Your physician may have ordered a test for you, like an abdominal ultrasound, where they look at the liver and they see that more than 5% of your liver cells are infiltrated with fat. And liver enzymes can be normal. So this is just a schematic of the liver and also some of the functions of the liver. So it's a really critically important organ in our body, very important to preserve its health. Everything that we consume, it's probably hard for you to see, but this portal vein right here, this purple one, everything that we consume goes through that portal vein and gets metabolized in some capacity and exposed to the liver in some capacity. Here are stages of liver damage. When you have early fibrosis, which is that middle section, it can be reversed back to normal liver. Fatty liver can be reversed back to normal healthy liver. But once you have advanced fibrosis, it is not possible to reverse it. So there are 5 main categories that cause fatty liver disease. We're focusing obviously on metabolic, but there's also alcohol, certain medications, specific genotype of hepatitis C, and rare genetic syndromes. There is no approved medications for fatty liver disease. The primary treatment is dietary intake, lifestyle changes, whole food, plant-based diet. You can reduce liver fat strictly by exercise alone, even if you're not losing weight, but the weight loss can reverse early fibrosis. You also want to avoid ketogenic diets. It drives atherosclerosis. It will raise your LDL, can lead to nutrient deficiencies, obviously fatty liver. It's going to decrease your energy availability. And it's not recommended by the American Cancer Society, the American College of Cardiology, or the American Heart Association. And PCRM has summarized very nicely some studies and some data out there about fatty liver disease. And those diets that were highest in vitamin A from whole foods, not supplements, but whole foods, in the form of carotenoids, like legumes, grains, fruits, and vegetables, were least likely to have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which we now know is metabolic associated steatotic liver disease. Red and processed meats increase the risk of fatty liver disease. And the NHANES study from 2005 to 2010 showed that those who adhered to the most healthful plant-based diet, it was protective against fatty liver disease. Pancreatitis. Again, if your triglycerides are over 500, this is a big risk. It's an inflammation of the pancreas. It can be life-threatening, whether it's acute or chronic. It's in 2 different stages. Acute typically is short-term. People can recover, but again, it can be life-threatening. And chronic pancreatitis, there's a poor prognosis. In addition to triglycerides, there is a weight loss medication, tirzepatide, which is a glucagon-like peptide and gastric inhibitory peptide combination called tirzepatide, which has been known to contribute to pancreatitis. There's some new data and research out there. The other ones like Ozempic and Wegovy and Mounjaro, they have not been studied on patients with pancreatitis or regards to pancreatitis, but it is a potential risk. 80% of pancreatitis is caused by alcohol and gallstones. And remember what we said earlier, alcohol directly raises your triglyceride level. So be very careful with that. So here are some steps you can take now. You want to increase your dietary intake of omega-3s, walnuts, lentils, chia seeds, flax seeds. Walnuts are very, very good, especially because of their content of alpha-linolenic acid, and we'll talk about that in a moment. You want a nutrient-dense, calorie-poor diet, ones that are low-fat, high in fiber. You want to go with a mono and polyunsaturated fats. Dr. Greger has published a study in nutritionfacts.org showing that quinoa, a cup a day times 12 weeks, lowered triglycerides by 36%. Cooking at home, you can control your ingredients and portions. Label read. Jeff Novick, a fantastic dietitian, has worked very closely at True North and with Dr. McDougall, who recently passed. And he has great videos on calorie density and label reading, which are critical, really, really critical. They're free, they're available online, so I would encourage people to watch that. You want to move at least 30 minutes a day, 60 is better. This is in addition to your normal activities of work and your normal activities of daily living. Weight loss, if your BMI is over 25, BMI is not perfect, but it's the best one we have, and it is the most studied. You want to avoid alcohol. The American Cancer Society has determined that no amount of alcohol is safe. Again, we know it raises your triglyceride levels. Avoid highly and ultra-processed foods, including the vegan ones. Many of them contain coconut oil, which is very high in saturated fat, which is going to raise your triglyceride levels. Avoid added, free, and simple sugars and refined carbohydrates as much as you can. Again, those are calorie dense and nutrient poor. Jeff refers to those as CRAP, which is an acronym he has, calorie rich and processed. And again, avoid like a strictly fruitarian diet. You're not going to get enough protein, and you're going to get too much natural fructose. Limit saturated fat intake. It's more harmful to the liver than sugar or unsaturated fats. And saturated fats versus sugar and unsaturated fats increase liver fats and triglycerides by 55%. There's, again, increased risk of heart disease and diabetes. And remember, too, this is a point that's often missed, is when you have type 2 diabetes, you have heart disease. It's an equivalent risk factor. It's not like, well, I have diabetes, I might get heart disease. You have heart disease. It just may not have fully manifested. So it's really important to pay attention to that. Again, 90% of saturated fats come from animal-based foods, but don't forget about the tropical ones like the coconut oil, full-fat coconut milk. And then really interesting, in order to get the EPA and the DHA we need to consume the omega-3 component ALA, alpha-linolenic acid. And high saturated fat intake decreases the conversion of alpha-linolenic acid to the EPA and DHA that we need. There are medications, they're very high dose, they're prescription, they're not vegan, but there are several here. Vascepa is the one that actually works best. It's approved with statins, so if you're on a statin, you can take Vascepa. It's purified EPA that seems to work the best in lowering triglycerides. Lovaza is another one. It's not approved with statins, but it's a combination of EPA and DHA. Niacin you can use, but most people don't tolerate the flushing or the GI side effects. There are fibrates out there like fenofibrate and gemfibrozil. You generally want to avoid them with statins, although there are some indication that gemfibrozil is probably better. But if we can do it with a whole food plant-based diet and movement, why not do that? There was a study that came out recently noting that high-dose fish oils, more than 1,000 milligrams a day, increase the risk of atrial fibrillation. Also in that study, it's for every 1 case of atrial fibrillation, there were 5 cases of reduced cardiovascular morbidity and mortality. So the benefits at this point are outweighing the risk, although it is a risk, and it is worth noting that AFib. There's not a lot of data out there if the algae-based omega-3s contribute to AFib or not. More studies need to be done there. So if you're doing over-the-counter, you want to keep it to less than 1,000 milligrams a day if you're doing the fish oil. Again, not a lot of data on the algae-based. Just a couple of notes, especially over-the-counter supplements, they're not regulated by the FDA at all for quality and purity. No supplement is. And also the EPA in those over-the-counter omega-3s might be too low to impact your elevated triglyceride levels. And remember, you might need a medication, right? Even if you're 100% whole food plant-based and you're plant perfect, there's maybe some other extenuating circumstances. So a medication might be needed, right? And oftentimes we do end up prescribing medications for our patients here. Our goal is to reverse conditions and get people off of medications, but oftentimes we do end up prescribing medications. So you're eating plant-based, but your triglycerides went up. That's not an uncommon occurrence. It takes time for your body to adjust. Look, is there a familial component where you might need medications? And then also really look at what you're eating. Get very serious about your eating. And I often have to do this with myself as well. It's like, I hear myself, I say this to myself all the time, but I eat healthy. And I also hear patients say, but I eat clean. I watch what I eat. My diet is good. But my question is, do you really? And is it really? And again, it's a question I ask myself periodically. So you want to keep it unprocessed, low fat, whole food, plant-based, journal what you're eating, and, work with your doctor, especially the doctors at Love.Life. We can look at what you're eating in journals. I know it's a little bit more effort, but we can find areas that we might be able to help you tweak things to get those triglycerides down. Again, avoid processed, even vegan foods, fruitarian diets, excess dried fruits, fruit juices, excess calories of any kind, and refined grains. You want to stop the coconut milks and coconut oils, especially the full fat, and then the alcohol. Increase your fiber intake. And my little added note is there's no such thing as moderation. There's really no cheat days. You have to be very consistent. And my example for moderation is even if they were 100% vegan, if you had a box of donuts, right? What's moderation? Is it 11? Is it 1? Is it 6? Right? It's not really a good thing to say in moderation, because what is moderation? There's no clear definition. And are you working with your physician? Or are you trying to go it alone? Right? And remember, it's not one pill, potion, powder, or person that fixes any one person or problem. It's a complex of many factors consistently implemented over a long period of time. Are you confused? Hopefully not. Hopefully this cleared some things up. But if you are, please come see us at Love.Life. We'd be happy to help you, and we'd be more than happy to take questions now. Thank you.
So let's go through the questions. There's some great ones. Anthony in El Segundo, California. Yay, Anthony, and yay, El Segundo. Wanted to know how long it takes for triglyceride levels to improve with diet and lifestyle changes.
I think it's very individual. And Dr. Scheuer, you probably have a lot to say on this, but I think it's very individual. It depends on how aggressive you are.
And also, triglycerides can vary. It's one of those that are much quicker to do than total cholesterol, et cetera. It can be dependent on what you ate the night before. If you ate a high calorie, high fructose meal the night before, your triglycerides can be high in the morning. So it's something we want to see a trend down. And, you want to make sure that you stay as healthy as possible, as long as possible, as Keary said, as Dr. O'Connor said. It's long, it's multiple things over a period of time. Make sure the night before you didn't have a bunch of palm oil or coconut oil or a huge dinner. That might make a difference. But work on it. It's important, and recheck it if it's high. Also, if you're not having it fasting, it can be higher if you're not fasting. Peter asked, I wondered about saturated fat in 80% dark chocolate, my only real source of saturated fat.
How much dark chocolate are you eating would be my question. Yeah. Probably an ounce or two would be okay. When you're looking at things like coconut oil is about 85 to 90% saturated fat. So people will say, well, I eat it because of the medium chain triglycerides, which is just such an insignificant portion of that coconut oil. It's primarily saturated fats. So, I would look at what how many grams of saturated fats are in there. And, if you're looking at it's similar to what's in an avocado, you're probably okay. Avocados do contain saturated fats, nuts and seeds. All plants contain some level of saturated fats. Dr. Scheuer, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with you. It depends on how much you are, what your numbers are, if you're just a tiny bit high. And also, we've got to not just look at one number. We have to look at the whole picture. Right. And so if everything is perfect, no family history, you've had a coronary artery calcification score that's 0, and you don't have high cholesterol, and you don't have anything else, and your triglycerides are 151, it's just one of those numbers. But we have to look at the person, the individual. So that's something where work with your doctor on that. Kathleen said, my whole family, we are whole food plant-based, SOS free, but my husband's triglycerides are slightly elevated. Any suggestions? Well, you mentioned quite a few. And how dangerous is it? Kathleen, go back and take a look at some of her slides. Again, triglycerides are an independent risk factor. So we do want to pay attention to them. You do want to get them down. And fiber, increasing your fiber, getting rid of some of, just adjusting your foods a little bit, more greens, less, less of the
citrus and berry can help. And then if you're making your own flour at home, maybe use, instead of oat flour, whole oats. It's going to change the texture of the recipe, right? But maybe that's not going to contribute as much, because it's not going to be absorbed as fast and as readily as something that's already, in a sense, pre-digested, right? We've ground that down a little bit. And every body is a little bit different, right? Because we all bring a different set of genetics. We all bring a different set of, ourselves into it. So while I might be able to do one thing, Dr. Scheuer may not be able to do the same thing. And I will tell you, last year, I did a little bit of investigation of cooking with dried fruits, dates specifically, and my triglycerides went through the roof. And I realized, like, I can't do dried fruits, right? So we in this space are constantly learning about ourselves as well too.
Yeah. And that's really important to know. Again, are you getting just a little too many calories? Are you getting too much dried fruit? That's where I see it in a lot of my patients, and the processed grains, or even, taking your oats and, making it into oat flour. Again, it's absorbed very fast. It's brought into the system very fast, and it can increase your triglycerides.
Yeah. And alcohol too. Like if you're having that half a glass of wine with dinner at night, cut it out, right? Get really serious about it, right? Journal things and look at the things that can contribute. These slides will all be available because this will be up on YouTube, so you can slow it down and stop it and write things down. Definitely go back and look at things. And there's way more information out there. Like this was just a broad brushstroke to kind of hit all the high points to help everyone.
Perfectly said. And Bob's Mamone asked if that 161 is too high, with a phenomenal total cholesterol. And it looks like she's a good weight, exercises well. Again, this is something that we'd have to look at a whole bunch of factors. What's your family history? What's your personal history? So that would be something to talk with your individual physician about, whether you have a physician, locally or through Love.Life Telehealth. Please make sure that physician actually really knows what they're talking about, though.
And remember, a mild elevation is 150 to 199. So that is elevated, and the goal is to get them less than 150.
Yeah. And Hannah, I think we answered Mary's questions. And Mary B., you mentioned that your triglycerides are low, but your total cholesterol is high. One of the things that we should look at is your total cholesterol high because you have high LDL or high HDL or high non-HDL or high ApoB? There's lots of different reasons why the total cholesterol can be high. And so we need to look at that more specifically with your doctor.
And also there is a slide in there about the 5 causes of fatty liver, 5 categories of causes. So again, you can go back on YouTube, slow it down, and you can look at that slide.
Yep. Yeah. Hannah says, can one have fatty liver when having low triglyceride?
That is a good question. You know what? That's a good question. I need to do some research on that and find out, because triglycerides are the storage form of fat, and I don't know, but I can go back and look and try and get the answer out to you.
And that would be something where we'd also, again, look at all of the different components of what's going on with you. What's your BMI? What's your history? Things like that.
Oh, you know what? Actually, I do have the answer, because remember that I was thinking specifically of cholesterol, but there are the 5 other causes, right? There's some rare genetic causes. There's some medications. We listed some of those medications. There's the genotype 3 of hepatitis C, and also alcohol. So yes, you can have fatty liver from other causes just besides triglycerides. So I misspoke earlier, and I apologize.
I've heard that citrus bergamot fruit can help with lowering triglycerides. Is there any truth on that?
So citrus and berries can help lower triglycerides.
Yep. So, and that would be one thing where you would, where testing is better. So test, not guess on that. Know what your levels are, try the bergamot, then recheck and see, because that may be somewhat individualized, but yes, that has been shown sometimes to do that. Just figure out how to chat. Hi, Tad from Detroit. Nice to see you. Lori says, my triglycerides are okay, but my LDL is still elevated at 130. That's down from 187. Excellent job. I have to eat more processed because of stomach issues. With that in mind, is it okay to eat more starchy foods and processed beans? Interesting question.
I think we'd have to know more about the stomach issues. I think it's kind of hard to comment on that. So you could see one of us in a visit or check with your physician on that.
And one thing, Lori, that I've found is it takes time. Keary mentioned this really early in the slides. I find that people who are losing weight their levels don't go down some go down immediately and some take a little bit longer. And I found that the longer you're plant-based and at your ideal weight, so both of those things, that's when things start to come down. The cholesterol, the LDL starts to come down. But then again, we have to look at your family history and some other parts of what's going on. So, 1 o'clock. It's 1 o'clock Mountain Time. We've been here for an hour. Any other questions? Lori mentioned gastroparesis and a possible ulcer. I'm sorry about that, or that's Mary mentioned that. Oh no, sorry. Lori mentioned the gastroparesis and possible ulcer. And Mary, where do I get chart of ideal weight?
That's a great question. You can find stuff online, and typically what I learned, although I've seen some formulations lately, which I haven't found evidence or data for, but it's typically like your ideal body weight is based on women at 5 feet. It's 105 pounds, and every inch over 5 feet, it's an additional 5 pounds, and then 106 for men, and every additional inch is 6 pounds. So that's what I was trained on. That's what I learned when I did some of my boards. But again, I've seen other people reference other ones. There are some formulas that you can do and you can calculate online. I think MD Calc has some. So you can go and play with that. But I think generally speaking, the rule of thumb is 5 feet is 105 for women and 6 feet is 106 for men. Kim, do you know?
Again, this is somewhat individualized too. A lot of people talk about BMI, but that's height versus weight. And so if you're extremely muscular, that can mess up that calculation. Some people talk about what was your weight when you were in high school? But I was heavy in high school. So I would look at before high school. So there's a lot of different ways to look at that. That's another one to just talk to your doctor about, but also what you feel is appropriate for you. When I went plant-based, I lost a lot of weight. And all of a sudden there was one point, and this was after I was 47 years of struggling with weight. I was like, hey, I'm losing too much weight. It was a very strange feeling. So in some ways you and your body will know. But Mary, feel free to talk to one of us docs about what you can see. And then you can look up online, look at the different ideal body weights on there, and then go and see what's best for you. Christine.
And also, definitely highlight the crap. That's from Jeff Novick for sure.
That was awesome.
That's great. That's fantastic. If you are working out, right? You're eating well and working out. So if you're not eating well and you're working out alone is not going to get you to your goal in terms of weight. But if you're working out, especially as a woman and as you age, we need to do resistance training. When you do resistance training, you're going to put on weight. Muscle weighs more than fat, right? It holds more water. So while your number on the scale may not be changing, your clothes might fit better. You're going to have less adipose tissue in your liver, right? You're going to have less visceral fat, right? Fat that kind of chokes out your organs. So it's really important to understand the different components to it, right? So if you're standing on the scale every day and it's not budging, you have to look at some other factors. Are you feeling better? Do you have more energy? The more you work out, the more your mitochondria upregulate ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is our little energy centers, right? It's going to give you more energy, right? So are you feeling better? Do you have more energy? Are you moving more? Do your clothes fit better? Do you have less fatty liver disease? It's complex. And like I said, in the one slide, there's no one thing that does it. It's a complex, it's many things in a very complex situation, but being very consistent over time. Consistency over time. It's getting healthy is kind of boring. It's doing those mundane things every single day will get you to the goal.
Excellent presentation, Keary. It was really, I learned a lot too. So thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. And if you have any questions or concerns that weren't answered here, feel free to reach out to Dr. O'Connor in the many states that she's licensed in, or any of the other wonderful docs at Love.Life Telehealth. You can go on to our website and just put in what state you're in, and you can see, and then look at who's available in your state. We're in all 50 states and DC. And then you can decide based on the person that you look at. If there's 2 or 3 people in the same state, you can look at all of our histories. We all live the lifestyle we prescribe to our patients. And we also work together very carefully so that if we have a question that we don't know the answer to, we will make sure that the rest of us are all involved in making sure we get to the root cause of what's going on with you. So,
and for our audience in El Segundo, we're open now. So,
woohoo!
Yeah. So thank you both. I do have another meeting I have to get to. So I appreciate the help from Christy behind the scenes, from Dr. Scheuer. I appreciate it. And come see us again in 2 weeks. We have these sessions every 2 weeks.
Have a great day.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.